over to Bill.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Simon. Yeah, I just thought I'd take a few minutes and run you through some of the developments that have taken place since we last spoke, which was, I believe, May 22nd. So there's been a fair bit that's happened since then. If my slides will advance. Okay, I'm not sure what's happening here. I think my keyboard may have died on me. Oh, there we go. Since our last webinar, now we had sought clarification from Industry Canada on a number of issues, particularly pertaining to the exemption for commercial messages sent under some circumstances by registered charities. And you may have seen we put out an issue alert on June the 5th, giving some FAQs based on that conversation. Subsequent to that, basically about a week before the law was to take effect, the CRTC, which is the body that's enforcing the regulations, got in touch to indicate that they had some issues with the information that had been provided to us by Industry Canada, who had written the regulations. We worked with Industry Canada, with the CRTC, to get some clarification from them on what their issues might be. They have subsequently issued some FAQs that are specific to registered charities and to the exemption. And we put out an issue alert on the 4th of July, which contained information about that. So if you haven't seen those things, there's some links in here. But if you go to the Imagine Canada website and you look under the Public Policy Program, you'll find all of the various links and updates to do with our efforts on CASL.
Now, sorry, Bill?
Just to review, in our conversation with Industry Canada.
Sorry, Bill, we just had someone ask if you could possibly speak a little louder. I don't know, maybe if... I can hear you quite well. Okay. I'm just not sure if everyone else has the same kind of volume level, so maybe just a little louder. Is that possible?
I will try to do so. I don't want to yell too much because there's some very thin walls in this office, and my colleagues are at work as well, but I will see what I can do. Now, with regard to Industry Canada, when we met with them, they basically confirmed their intent that the exemption for messages sent by registered charities with the purpose of raising funds, that should be broadly interpreted. Their intent was for that to be to catch a lot of activity. The way they put it to us was basically anything under the fundraising guidance that the CRA defines as fundraising would be exempt messages, so you wouldn't have to worry about consent. And as well, they also indicated that some categories that aren't fundraising as defined by CRA would also fall under the exemption. So those would be things like if you're offering some of your programming with a cost recovery element, or if you're an arts organization promoting upcoming performances and ticket sales. So Industry Canada really had, they really confirmed a broad view of what they intended the exemption for charities to cover. And as I mentioned, that was the information that we put out in FAQ form in our issue alert of June 5th, and which before we put it out, we actually sent a copy of it to the Industry Canada officials responsible for the file, and they confirmed that in their view, everything that we were putting in there was accurate. Now, the CRTC, as I mentioned, they're the body that's responsible for enforcing CASL, and they got in touch with us to indicate that they may have a different interpretation than Industry Canada, but at the time they didn't really provide details about how their interpretation might differ from Industry Canada's. We pressed them hard because we said, look, if you want this to take place July 1st and you want people to follow the rules, it's incumbent on you to do something to let people know what you think the rules are. If registered charities are going to comply with CASL, then they need to know what the enforcement body views the exemption as covering, because the last thing we need is for charities, in the absence of clarity, to make all kinds of investment in systems and then find out that they didn't need to do that. Industry Canada was also very involved in this process with us, and we eventually, the CRTC, as I mentioned, issued some FAQs on the 4th of July, which again we put out as an issue alert. You can also find those directly on the CRTC website. And they were much more closely aligned with the interpretation provided by Industry Canada than it seemed the CRTC's initial position was going to be. Initially, they didn't even think that things covered by the CRA fundraising definition would all be exempt, let alone the issues beyond that Industry Canada had intended to be exempt. So it's a much better result from the CRTC. We're pretty confident that it lines up pretty well with what Industry Canada had told us. And after all, Industry Canada being the people who wrote the regulations, it's logical to think that, that their view of what the regulations mean should be taken into account. So just a couple of things I want to mention. Now, in terms of the enforcement approach from the CRTC, this was something that was very important for us to get a statement from them on, because as you're aware, there are some pretty strict maximum penalties for any organization or individual that violates CASL. And, you know, those of you that deal with the CRA, you know that when it comes to your charitable status and things that the CRA regulates, that the approach is not to swing the hammer the first time something goes wrong. It's to work with an organization to find out what went wrong, to find out why it happened, and, you know, take an education and compliance first approach rather than a punitive approach. So they did put this statement in their FAQs, and the slides here quote it directly. You know, they want to deter people. They want to promote it in the best way. They want to promote compliance. And they say, you know, any enforcement response on their part will depend on a number of factors, including the nature of what happens, the seriousness of any violation, a history of noncompliance, and the key one here is measures taken to prevent it from taking place. And they list some of the factors that come into play that need to be kept in mind if they investigate any organization. And the first one, like I said, the steps you've taken to show due diligence. So tracking how you obtain email addresses, having an unsubscribe option, things like that that really show that you are making an effort to comply, and especially with the unsubscribe, that you're making an effort that people who don't want to receive emails have the option not to receive them. That's going to be a big thing. They're going to focus their investigations where there's a large number of complaints or where there's a major transgression. So, I mean, they have very limited resources, and there are literally millions of organizations, whether it's small businesses, large businesses, people with home-based businesses, charities, nonprofits, government departments are even covered by this. So there are literally millions of organizations and individuals that will have to be complying with CASL, and they have very limited resources. So they're going to focus their investigations, like I said, on major situations. And they've also confirmed that they're going to emphasize education rather than punishment. which is a big thing for us and this is also for the small business community where people just don't necessarily have the resources or the knowledge to comply with everything, even if they're trying to do so. You know, you can't always afford lawyers, you can't always afford new IT systems. So, you know, where people are making the honest best effort they can make in their circumstances, you know, the fact that there's going to be an emphasis on education rather than punishment is a welcome. It's welcome that they've confirmed that. And as well, and this is with regard to the class action lawsuits that could take place if there is something that happens, and you know you work with the CRTC, and this can be proactive. It's either the CRTC comes to you and says you've done something wrong, or if you think you might have done something wrong and you go to the CRTC and you sign an agreement saying here's what happened, here's what we're doing about it, we promise not to do it again, and the CRTC accepts that. In cases like that, then you can't be sued in a class action lawsuit. So the enforcement approach, we're hopeful, is going to be a fairly, I don't want to say light touch, but a fairly reasonable approach to things. So I don't think anyone has to worry that if they send, you know, one errant email that someone's going to be cracking down and imposing million-dollar fines or anything like that. And then I just want to highlight as well a couple of the key things from the FAQs that they put out. Now the first one here does Section 6, and Section 6 is the section that says you can't send anything without consent unless you meet certain conditions. Does that apply to registered charities? Yes, it applies. It applies to everybody, whether you're a business, whether you're an individual, it applies. So registered charities are not exempt because they're registered charities. It's the messages you send that may or may not be exempt. So because there's been some speculation that charities were exempted from the legislation, which is not the case, has never been the case. Charities are subject to it, but some of the messages they send are exempt. And you know they reiterate the wording in the regulations that the messages that are exempt are those where the primary purpose is to raise funds for the charity. And they also confirm here that legitimate messages, that they're going to focus on those attempting to circumvent the rules under the guise of a registered charity. This is something that they've been really concerned about, is people setting up bogus charities and abusing the rules, abusing the exemption, and by the time the CRA investigates the charity and takes away its status, the damage has been done. It's regulating and legislating for an extreme case, but that's the world that we live in these days. Sometimes is you know, rules are drawn up to deal with the extreme outliers, and without necessarily considering the impact of those rules on the bulk of people that are just trying to go about their business legitimately. And so then the question becomes raising of funds and this issue of primary purpose. So they say, you know, the primary purpose is the main reason for the commercial message. There could be other things in the message, but the main thrust of the message, for it to be exempt, has to be raising funds. So they gave a couple of examples of when a message sent by a registered charity is exempt. And this first one is pretty key because this really speaks to things that are in the fundraising definition, and as well the way that they've worded it. some activities that that potentially fall beyond the fundraising definition as put down by CRA. So a commercial message sent by or on behalf of a charity promoting an event and or the sale of tickets for an event such as a dinner, golf tournament, theatrical production or concert, or other fundraising event where the proceeds from ticket sales flow to the registered charity. So this is key. Some of these things may or may not fall under the fundraising definition by CRA, but one of the big tests is going to be, is the money going directly to the charity? So you're holding a fundraising dinner, is that money flowing through to you directly? You're an arts organization, you're putting on a concert, is that money flowing directly to you? That seems to be one of the key things that they're going to look at, is what is the flow of the money. Another example they give where the exemption applies is a newsletter. So a charity sends out a newsletter that doesn't have any commercial type activity. And they've confirmed that a newsletter is not subject to the rules. It's exempt. There has been some speculation that newsletters are not exempt, but they've said here in their FAQs that if it's a newsletter, it's information about your activities or upcoming campaigns, doesn't try to engage anyone in any kind of commercial transaction. That is not a commercial message, therefore you don't need consent for those. You don't have to worry about those. Another one where the exemption applies is, and again, this is where you have other things in your newsletter. So often, charities will send out a newsletter. They'll also have information about fundraising events or whatnot. And so and sometimes you'll have a corporate sponsor for an event. It'll be a fun run sponsored by whoever. So they say that, where you have a newsletter where it has information about those kind of events, that can be viewed as being under the exemption. So that was something else that that there was some concern about with the newsletters that combine other activity. Now, one specific example they gave where the exemption does not apply, and this is sort of, I guess, social marketing or whatever, but where you've got a relationship with a company, the private sector, whatever, where people buy product X and then the store or the manufacturer donates a portion of those proceeds to the charity, that is still a commercial message and that is not exempt. So if you're sending out a message to people, and I'll just use the example, if you're sending out a message that says, go buy a Coke this week because for every Coke you buy, Coke will donate 10 cents to us, that is not exempt. That is something that you could only send to people that you've got some kind of consent from. Because when you look at the flow of the funds there, you're sending the message to the individual. The individual is having a transaction with Coke or with that retailer, and then that retailer or that manufacturer is donating to you. So you're sending a message to someone with whom you're not then having a direct financial relationship. So that is something that you can't use under the exemption. Now, you could still send messages like that to people with whom you have consent, whether it's express consent, whether it's implied consent. You just have to, you can't send those out broadly to people that you don't have those sorts of relationships with. And so again, they also confirmed the definition of implied consent. So as a registered charity, it's someone who makes a donation or a gift, performs volunteer work, or attends a meeting organized by the charity. And in general, someone who falls into any of those categories, you have 2 years that you can send them any kind of message you want. And every time they participate in one of these activities, the 2 years starts over again. So every time someone makes a donation, you start the 2 years over again. Every time they come to a meeting, the 2 years starts over again. Except in this initial transitional period, so anyone that was on your donor list for July 1st, you've got 3 years for them in the first instance, and then if they make another donation, you can extend that. But those people that are on your list right now are good for 3 years in that regard. So just a few other resources. Again, the main Government of Canada website with general information where you can find the Act. You can find a copy of the regulations is fightspam.gc.ca. I have a link here to an industry. I think this was on the last set of slides as well. Industry Canada, their presentation on the Act and regulations, and this has a really good overview in it of the consent issue and implied consent categories. And then as well, the CRTC has finally created its own resource, its own landing page about CASL, and so that web address is there, and that's where they've posted their FAQs. The earlier slide where I mentioned it, there's a hyperlink to that, so I'll make sure that Simon's got a copy of this deck with the live hyperlinks, and anyone who wants to get that will be able to get that from him. So I guess at the end of the day, it's not as bad as we thought it would be. You know, charities that want to send out information to people, newsletters, where you're not asking for anything, that's clearly now been confirmed as that is not a commercial message. The law doesn't apply to that. You don't have to worry about that. Soliciting donations, the view of the CRTC has always been that if you just want to send out emails saying, we are charity X, please donate to us, please support the cause, their view has always been that those ones don't fall under the definition of commercial. And so where we've got the additional comfort now is some of those activities that are vital for bringing funds into organizations, whether it's, you know, dinners, banquets, concerts, fun runs, sports days, those sorts of things. There's a lot more comfort now, both from Industry Canada, which has always been of the view that you shouldn't have to worry about these things, but now as well the CRTC is indicating that they are going to take a fairly broad view of the exemption for these things as well. And then, like I said, there's always the, depending on where you're getting your email addresses from, there's always the categories of consent that can apply, whether it's express consent, you know, when someone signs up for a fun run and you have them tick the box on the registration form saying, yes, I want to receive all your emails, including things where you might try to sell me something, or the implied consent, you know, your donors list, people that have given to you, that is implied consent. You just have to keep track of how long it lasts. But, you know, people in those categories, when you've got consent, you can send them anything you want. You just have to make sure that if they contact you and say, I don't want to receive this anymore, that you take steps to respect that. And so I think I'll end there, and if happy to try to answer any questions anyone might have. Just Simon, just a bit of housekeeping here. I don't have the little sidebar up on my screen with the chat box, so if there's anything that's come in by chat, if you want to relay that to me, that would be great.
Okay, for those that weren't here at the start, I have muted everyone, so if you do want to ask a question through your webcam or through the phone, you can just use the raise hand feature. It's a little hand thing on the side little sidebar there. Or you can also type in your questions. Bill, you said that you are unable to see the chat? the questions?
Yeah, well, I guess when I pulled my slides up, I lost the little sidebar, and I'm not sure how to get it back without going out of PowerPoint here.
Okay. Well, I think you can go
I
out of PowerPoint now, I imagine, and it should come
Okay,
back.
and then let's see what happens.
We'll get a question from Jeff here first.
Okay.
Okay, Jeff, you're on.
Hi, Bill. Jeff Scotton from the Canadian Ski Patrol, and the same issue that I've spoken to you about is that the requirement to include the opt-out mechanism for what are essentially like our 90% communication direction to our members, but we also use that vehicle to carry ads to make a little bit of revenue to raise funds to pursue the mission of the organization. We're still required to carry an opt-out mechanism which allows our members to thus sort of sever the communications channel to the organization they're a member of.
Mm-hmm.
And is there any chance that some of these things are going to get reviewed sooner rather than later?
No one has said anything directly, but I mean, as any new system comes into play, there's always the opportunity. I mean, there's always the opportunity if there's unintended consequences or things that people hadn't thought of to flag those and bring those to people's attention. Now, in this case, again, with the membership being something that is that's an implied consent relationship. So if people are members of an organization, then that implied consent exists, which means that sending commercial messages isn't an issue.
But we still have to provide them with an opt-out mechanism from the receiving the stream in which it belongs.
Yeah,
that's the issue for us.
Yeah, and that's one of those
lifeline.
things.
It's how we communicate with our members.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where it's becoming more and more apparent that some organizations are able to, and this is both public and not private sector, not nonprofit sector. Some organizations have systems that people can opt in and out of certain types of messages. The different streams of mailouts, and others just don't have that and don't necessarily have the capacity to do that. So that's something that going forward is definitely something that, if we get the chance to sort of try to get more clarification, more direction from people on things, that we'd be definitely looking at that one.
Yeah, and I guess I don't want to dominate things, but the frustration is that we can actually send an email to somebody and say, please give us dough, but and not include an opt-out mechanism. But
yeah,
we can't send a message to our own members that includes an ad which raises funds for us.
Yeah.
Without providing the opt-out mechanism. It seems to be a perverse and ironic structure.
And I think that that's probably one of those unintended consequences. Now that being said, I'm not going to advise either way on what you should or shouldn't do in that situation. But given that this is something where it's members, you're a membership-based organization, you're communicating with your members. I think we'd spoken about you making it actually a term of a requirement of membership.
Yeah, we're very wary of that, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the last thing you want to do is to, I think every organization is trying to find more volunteers, not facilitate their departure.
Yeah.
And so we're very wary. So in the interim, we're not going to take that strong step. But we're certainly entertaining making it a condition of membership.
It's something, again, like I said, I mean, it's something that I think you guys will need to think through in terms of, okay, they've said, they're going to, they're not going to take necessarily a hardcore approach and look to punish people. They're going to look at the whole circumstance. They're members of an organization. You're communicating with your membership. there's this, there's an element of cost-benefit analysis, risk analysis that I think you'd want to go through there, and in terms of how far you want to go with the opt-out, or just continuing to do things as you've been doing them.
Yeah, I don't think we have I don't think we feel that we have an option but to observe the requirements of the legislation and regulations, and we're just concerned about what it means for the impact on our members and our ability to manage the organization in an efficient way, particularly given that the legislation itself is not supposed to have
it's the sort of thing that if you can keep track of that, because going forward, if we want to try to get this thing looked at again at some point and reopened, if we're able to give examples to them of the impact that some of this has had, and truly in a case like this, probably an unintended consequence, that if you do find that your members are opting out of the communications, and because of that you're not able to provide them with other key information, then if that's something you can keep track of, that would definitely be information that would be of high value to us going forward.
Yeah, I'll let you know how it plays out.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill, can you see some of the questions there on the panel now? On the control panel? There was a question from Georgia Stanley.
Okay, I might be missing something here. Oh, wait a second.
There's just a question from Pam L.
Okay, I might be missing a box here.
It should just be above chat, like there's a question section.
Yeah, okay, I don't have that section here.
Oh, okay, if I make you an organizer also, do you see it?
Oh, now I see it.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. Okay. Of course, it's really, really tiny here, so I'm just trying to Are newsletters only exempt for registered charities? What about nonprofit organizations? Newsletters themselves, again, that is not specific to registered charities as far as we know, because if a newsletter doesn't have any commercial content, because the bill only affects messages that have what they consider commercial content. So trying to sell something, offering something for sale, offering something for lease, offering investment opportunities, things like that. So if there isn't commercial content in a message, then regardless of who sends it, it's not covered by the legislation. So if your newsletter is purely here's who we are, here's what we've been up to, and you're not selling anything in it, you're not asking for money, then it should be completely outside the scope of the bill to begin with. So it all comes down to content rather than whether you're a nonprofit or a charity in that regard. Just looking here, is opening an e-newsletter considered a transaction in that it would renew implied consent? That I don't believe would be the case, because they're fairly specific about what kind of transactions trigger the implied consent, and that's making a donation, it's attending a meeting, it's becoming a member of an organization, it's volunteering. So simply clicking on the email that you've received isn't sufficient to either achieve implied consent from someone or to have the 2-year period renew on them. So. And I'm just checking to see if there's more here. One here, what if the business says for every like we get on Facebook, we'll donate $1? I think that's, again, that would be, that is one that I honestly, so I guess there the scenario is, rather than sending out in your newsletter, you know, buy a Coke and they'll donate to us, it would be like Coke on their Facebook page and they'll donate to us. One of the definitions of a commercial message is promoting an individual or an organization that is engaged in commercial activity. So in a case of like Coke on Facebook and they'll donate to us, I wouldn't want to count on an exemption for that, because arguably you're promoting them, and there's potentially some issues there. So I don't know that that I'd want to count on an exemption for sending out a message like that. Another one here. We're a nonprofit. Our members are organizations that run farmers markets. We have an email list of our members' vendors, which were collected from a variety of places, including vendor emails that were listed publicly on our farmers markets websites, vendor emails that were passed along by our members, vendor email that were passed along by other organizations. Those can fall under various categories of consent. If you've got the emails from someone's website, they've got a website, they have their name, they have their email, and you use that email to send them information that is relevant to their activity, relevant to their business, then by publicly posting their emails like that, they have given consent. And that consent doesn't actually expire unless they tell you stop emailing me. So you don't have to go through the pretense of looking at their website every 2 years just to keep track of that. But you'd want to be able to, if someone questions you on it, you'd want to be able to say, we got it from their website, it was publicly available. What we're emailing them about is relevant to their business and it's relevant to ours. The other two scenarios you gave there of other organizations passing along those email addresses to you, or individuals giving you someone's email address, there is a mechanism for what they call third-party referrals. So I think that you might be interested in product X. So I give your email address to that company or that charity or that organization. If you get an email address in that way, someone says to you, I think Joe Blow would be interested in what you're offering, here's their email address, then you can send them one message and try to get consent from them. Now, what you might want to do, though, in a case like that, if someone says, you know, there's this company might be really interested, or there's this person might be really interested in this, and they give you that email address, check to see if that email address is publicly available. So in this case, you know, someone tells you about a farmer's market that you've not had interaction with. Do they have a website? Is that email address listed on that website? Because then that is consent. If the only way you've got it is someone gave it to you, then you can send one message to them and say, we got your email address from Joe Smith. Here's who we are. We thought you might be interested. Would you be okay with us sending you, putting you on our email list? And if they don't reply or if they say no, then you've got to take them off your list. Unless, like I said, if their email address is publicly available, that they've made it publicly available, then you don't have to worry about getting that consent. That they've given consent. They've given basically everybody in the world implied consent by putting their email address up on their website. Just going through this to see if there's a... On the newsletter, though, you would still need implied or express consent to send it. You cannot randomly send it to someone whose email address you had. Again, with newsletters, if there's nothing commercial in it, there's no limitations on who you can send it to. The implied consent, the express consent, those only come into play if it's a commercial message and it's not exempt. So if it's a newsletter with no commercial content, then it's not restricted by CASL at all. CASL doesn't apply to it. You can send that to anybody you want whose email address you have. And it's actually the same thing if you're a registered charity and you just want to send out a message saying, please donate. That's not considered a commercial message, so you can send that as well to anybody you'd like. It's where you get into the commercial emails that the issues of consent and opt-outs and whatnot come into play. I think that's all that I've seen in the chat box.
Bill, there's one that just got posted from Carol Ann.
Okay. I may be scrolling the wrong way. Is it at the top or the bottom? Oh, okay, yeah. We offer professional development and training for the nonprofit sector. Notifying our member agencies is not an issue. I assume that they're giving explicit consent when they pay for their membership dues. The issue is the other agencies that sometimes want to participate in the training. Please note, we'd love to. We never make any money on them. Isn't that the story of our sector? Again, yeah, I mean, people that are members, you've got that consent from them because membership is implied consent. If they're not members, again, it comes down to how are you getting their email addresses. So if they are agencies that have websites and you're getting the information from their websites, then that is implied consent on their part by putting their information there, and you're offering a good or service that is directly related to their role in the organization's whose website they're on. So if I'm listed as finance director of a charity, people can't start sending me emails offering me deals on big screen TVs. But if I'm listed as finance director of a charity, they can send me emails related to my role as finance director of a charity. So a situation like that with professional development for nonprofits, again, if the information you're using, if the email addresses you're using are publicly available, then you're fine, and then you should be fine and dandy. If people make inquiries with you, so someone sends you an email, we're interested in the kind of courses that you offer, then if it's an inquiry like that, then you've got 6 months that you can still send them stuff. If they've ever participated in any of the courses, then each time when they participate in something, even if they're not a member, if they participate in something like that, that's a business relationship, and that gives you a 2-year implied consent period as well. So in that regard, it sounds like you're probably on pretty safe ground to keep doing what you're doing. Again, really what it all comes down to is where did you get the email addresses? And if you know where you got the email addresses from, then chances are that if anyone questioned you, you'd be able to say, look, you made an inquiry with us 5 months ago. CASL says we've got 6 months, we can send you stuff. So, there it is. And again, you came on one of our courses a year ago, so, that was implied consent. It's really about, where are you getting the email addresses from, and, just being able to answer that question if you're ever questioned, on what basis did you send a message to this person. So.
Just a reminder, if anyone wants to ask a question through their webcam or phone or whatever, however you're communicating, you can just by using the raise hand feature that's on the right. I see there's another question here by Georgia Stanley.
Okay. We are a nonprofit, and our membership is made up of other organizations. We have a list of businesses and individuals we contact, which is made up of public emails we gathered from our members' website and emails that were sent to us by our members or partner organizations. Again, that's similar to.
I think that was the question she asked, but she just wound up asking again later on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she has another question she just asked.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I'm just looking for it here. They seem to be showing up in.
It should be at the very bottom when you scroll down. There's two.
I'm just. Yeah, that's not. I don't have it at the bottom. I'll check at the top. For some reason, my my question bar is only about 1 line deep, so having a tough time scrolling through them. Actually, maybe if you've got that there, Simon, could you maybe
All right.
read that one out for me? Sorry about that.
Is promotion of professional development like conferences, webinars, or manuals, are they included? And is promotion of professional development, including links to ticket sales in a newsletter, considered commercial content?
So I guess that all depends. I mean, is it something being done by a registered charity, or because promotion of professional development or ticket sales, was that? Did I hear that correctly?
It's just the promotion of any kind of professional development. Example, like conferences, webinars, or manuals.
Okay, promotion of professional development would be, yeah, promoting conferences or manuals or whatnot. Those would all be commercial. Then the question is, who's doing it? If you're a registered charity, then you may fall under certain exemptions for it. If you're not a registered charity, then you have to look at the consent issue, the implied consent, the issue of where you got it. where you got the email addresses and those sorts of issues. So promotion of those things is commercial, but it's all a matter of whether you've got consent or exemptions that you can fall back on.
There's just a clarification from Sarah here. Just for clarification, as a registered charity, we don't need permission to send messages? Is the question?
Pardon me?
The question, for clarification, as a registered charity, we don't need permission to send messages? That's her question, right?
Again, it depends on the type of message. So newsletters that have nothing commercial in them, no one needs permission for that. As a registered charity, if the message is purely, "We are charity X, please donate to us," then that is not covered. That's not considered commercial. You can send that to anybody. But other types of fundraising messages, many of them you probably won't need permission. So again, because they're commercial, but they'll fall under the exemption for registered charities. So if you're, if everything you're sending out is asking for donations, then you're fine. If what you're sending out is, we've got a fundraising dinner coming up, please buy a ticket, then that's the kind of thing that's fine and dandy. It's where you get into things like third-party promotions and whatnot that you really have to think about it. But by and large, our impression from the CRTC is that most of what you would consider fundraising, you're going to be okay with. That's going to fall under the exemption.
Are there any more questions out there? Remember, you can just type out your question or use the raise hand feature. I believe it should be a kind of an orange hand there. I think we've covered all the questions that have been asked so far. If there are no more, I guess we can end this session right now.
Okay, and and again, this isn't it's not an easy one to get your heads around. And like I said, I'd highly recommend, if you haven't had a look at them yet, look at some of the information that we've published and put up on our website. Have a look at the FAQs that the CRTC has put out. They're not complicated reads, and the main thing is trying to get this in terms that people can understand. If you read the regulations, it's going to make your head spin, but we and the CRTC have made some efforts to try to put those into user-friendly language. And again, if there's weird scenarios or anything like that, feel free to drop us a line, and we'll do the best that we can to get that information for you. But the main thing is, I think it's don't panic. I don't think anyone should be panicking. But just be mindful of what you're doing, and be mindful of really what the goal of the legislation is, which is that if people don't want to be getting emails from you, then you should stop sending them to them. And so just make sure that if people get in touch with you, if people are unsubscribing, that you're respecting that, or if people are getting in touch with you and saying, please stop sending me stuff, that you make sure you get them off your list, because those sorts of actions will go a long way to making sure that that you're seen as on side, and that no one decides to file complaints about you or anything like that. So, again, I hope this has been helpful, and I want to thank everyone for participating. And thank Simon and Volunteer Alberta once again for